Well, welcome. My name is Viv Vipperman. I'm with Eagle Venture Fund. And we're excited to welcome you all here today to learn a little bit more about labor trafficking, and particularly how Eagle Venture Fund and through the Eagle Freedom Fund is combating labor trafficking in the world through some amazing technology companies that we get to invest in. So turning it over to General Partner Wes Lyons to share a little bit more as we go. Wes?
Thanks, Vip, and appreciate each of you listening here live today. Very happy to move this conversational. If you've got any questions, just chime in with a text or just unmute. We've got a small enough group here that we can do question and answer. My plan is to kind of share often the labor trafficking elements of the Eagle Freedom Fund's portfolio kind of fade a little bit because it's so exciting to hear some of the front and center sex trafficking solutions that are happening. But this is I'll share a little bit about how the Freedom Fund came to be and how we look at the world, but then the examples will really dive into the labor trafficking side of it, which actually has breathtaking scale. 26 million labor trafficking victims, according to the ILO as of a couple of years ago, and they touch every facet of the marketplace. So we're very excited about some of the solutions and the chance for really scalable change in these areas. But many people kind of open with the question when they'll hear we kind of have a background from whether it was from military or family experiences. We all have a reason that we're here, that we wanted to point venture capital at tech solutions to fighting human trafficking. But most people, when they hear that there is a fund dedicated to this, very quickly kind of ask something along the lines of, are you sure that's for profit, or is this really companies that you're talking about, or are we talking nonprofits? And we actually just released a study, and we could probably drop it. Vip, do you think we could drop a link to the study in the chat here? This is just showing we really believe that there is a counter-trafficking technology industry, that every other industry or every other major crime has an industry associated with it, whether that's, you might be familiar with counter fraud or counter identity theft, or cybersecurity is really large, or counter physical theft. Every major crime set has its respective counter crime industry, and until very recently, except for counter trafficking. Or like, what's so different about this crime that we shouldn't have a counter crime industry? And the study that we're dropping in here shows we're assessing it's right about $500 million per year that is being spent today. So micro, tiny industry, but growing really, really fast. And you can look at that study to see why. But the quick way to understand it, if you don't want to read the whole study, is that the counter trafficking industry is following the echoes of what we saw in cybersecurity over the last 20 years. So if you put yourself in the shoes of cybersecurity circa 2004 is about where we are if you overlay the graphs. Cybersecurity was about $3 billion per year, and was about to go on a 100x run from 3 billion to 300 billion. This is a countercrime industry. And if you interview the entrepreneurs that went on that 20-year run, they'll highlight these three things that we have on the screen here that really drove this 100x run. One was regulatory pressure, which was, think of like any financial or healthcare regulated industry started including cybersecurity in the lists of things people needed to do from the regulatory perspective. Then second was the courtrooms. Courtrooms started holding companies accountable if they lost their client data, weren't doing the industry standard best practices, and that happened at scale. That woke everybody up. And then really insurance was the kicker, where if you're a small business owner, you know that when you go for that insurance rider on your liability insurance, what you get in return when you ask for that is a checklist of things that you need to buy. It's McAfee, it's pen testing, it's all these different things that you have to go buy in order to be able to get ready to a place where they'll insure you. Those are the three pillars that drove a 100x run on cybersecurity. And the exciting thing is we're seeing all three in play on counter trafficking today. regulatory in the labor trafficking space. It's the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act. It's the Canada Supply Chain Act. It's the EU Corporate Directive. The courtrooms are doing their part. We just saw, it feels like every week right now we're seeing a settlement. There's a couple hundred in motion right now, a majority of them in the hospitality space, but also touching finance and transportation, other adjacent. It's really where people are sold from, how the money is moved, how the people are moved, how the advertising is happening. Those are the companies that are effectively making money off of trafficking. They're getting smacked by the courtrooms, and that's producing the appropriate pressure that litigation is supposed to. And then insurance is coming into play. Gen Re is one of the biggest reinsurers in the world, and they just came out last week with a big article saying, is human trafficking the big unseen risk that insurance isn't talking about? Specifically, where we're seeing the most maturity in this is actually the regulatory pressure around labor trafficking. So the EU corporate directive, to dive into why there's so much spending on this space, put 5% of global top line revenue on the table as how much can be, how large the fines can be if companies aren't looking into their supply chains and eliminating forced labor. So really getting the teeth in the from the regulatory perspective to drive spending. And we're really excited that the same echo that we saw from 100x run in cybersecurity is happening in counter trafficking. And that's part of why we see it growing at 44% per year right now, which it means we absolutely have a little baby industry here that is on its way to really capitalism playing the role it's supposed to alongside for-profit, alongside nonprofits and government in fighting human trafficking. Many of you may be familiar that with our first fund, we raised $19 million and put it into 20 companies. And there's really three verticals of how we invest from a counter-trafficking perspective. One is the safe digital world for kids. So think of AI to protect children, parents trying to protect their children online. The second is decimating the sex trafficking industry. That is partnering with hospitality, finance, transportation companies, the companies that are most at risk, to help them build scalable solutions. And then we're going to talk specifically here about the labor trafficking industry and some of the exciting solutions. There is actually a lot of money being spent in this space because companies are realizing there's so much risk. I'll dive into a great example out of Fund 1 that is dominoing beautifully. Evidensity is a company, I've been on the board of Evidensity for several years. This is one that actually predated the Freedom series of funds, and we've added to it for growth here from the Freedom funds. And they came to us, they're in 82 countries. They have ability to map all over the world. They call it from dirt to consumer. How do you think of, we know we have 26 million labor trafficking victims, and we know they're in the supply chains. Let's just figure out, where are they? And they came to us probably 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago, and said, hey, we just tried out our capabilities to test our skills. And it was actually out of Latin America. They took the first convicted case of labor trafficking out of Latin America. It was an Ecuadorian plantation of abaca, which I didn't know what abaca is. It's actually most of our tea bags are made of abaca. It's either something synthetic or abaca. And Ecuadorian government has been stepping up action. They had convicted this plantation of labor trafficking and made it all official, but they hadn't shut it down. So the abaca is still being produced by slaves. And Evidensity said, well, let's map. We can use this capability and start mapping, where's this abaca ending up? And it ended up with a whole slew of publicly traded companies, including our very familiar brand Lipton. And we went, whoa, if you can do that, you could, like Pandora's box. We've got a really powerful capability to be able to map where these atrocities are happening. And we came to them and said, we had read Cobalt Red, and the just brutal atrocities that are happening there in the DRC mining sector, and said, hey, would you be willing to map what's happening in the DRC up to publicly traded companies in the S&P 500? I've kind of showed you on the slide the punchline here. We raised a little bit of philanthropic capital actually to test that capability, and they hit 105 companies in the S&P 500 that are using just tantalum. It wasn't looking at cobalt and gold and and it was just one sector of what's coming out of the DRC. And that really proved the capability that we now have between AI and on the ground. It's really the mesh of AI and people that brings a capability to be able to see what's happening in supply chains at a level that hasn't been done before. And that really kind of opened for us Pandora's box, the ability to start mapping these 26 million labor trafficking victims to the publicly traded companies that are using them. And what that dominoed into was actually the opportunity to be able to write letters and start advocating, because many public market shareholders would love to use their voice, whether it's proxy voting or as shareholders, to be able to influence companies. And we started writing letters saying, hey, we really want to do something about this, to all these 105 companies. In the process, we actually met a company that our friends at Talented had been investing in here in Africa. And this company, Power Resources International, was actually 15 years into trying to solve this problem, 6 years into testing a blockchain solution, where they're able to ride their motorcycles all around the western part of the DRC is where all the mines are. They ride their motorcycles around doing inspections about who's doing, not all mines in the DRC are human rights violations. There are actually people doing it right. And through those inspections, and then using low Earth orbit satellites and partnering with the government to do inspections and building their own refinery, the first refinery in Africa, they are able to come to market with every single day blockchain records of who mined the tantalum, how it got to the refinery, and how it was refined. So they truly, between their inspections, the blockchain, the government, and the low Earth orbit satellites, they're now adding UAVs, have a really compelling case that they have truly ethically sourced tantalum coming out of the DRC. And what really excited us was that they have Apple at the table as the first buyer of this truly ethical supply chain. This is highlighting, we're kind of starting to get our feet wet in the space of advocacy, helping our public markets friends to really have a really exciting letters of praise, and in some cases we might get into letters of pressure, where we have exciting solutions being used by publicly traded companies. And we're also forefront here, deep in diligence on this blockchain technology to be able to scale this solution, because this is where labor trafficking is maybe a little bit more nuanced in trying to understand how to deal with it. Because the temptation when you read Cobalt Red is to just say, stay away from the DRC. I don't want anything to do with anything sourced out of the DRC because I don't want blood on my hands. But that doesn't actually really help the 8-year-old kid that is pulling tantalum out of the ground with his hands. What he needs is courageous investors who are willing to spend 15 years on the ground in the DRC, building solutions that actually elevate his standard of living. And that's exactly what Ray, Power, and the team at Power Resources International have been doing. Can't guarantee it'll be fun too, but we are excited about this possibility that their technology is well tested, already is being used by Apple, literally had some hand in the recent peace deal with the White House, and several other major influencers have helped to broker a peace deal in the DRC. And the chance to scale that via blockchain technology and to really bring a scalable solution for sourcing out of Africa is one of the most exciting things that I've ever been part of. And part of that is actually the ability to have high conviction investors like Eagle Freedom Fund II, who really are built around a thesis like this. And so it's not in the fund yet, but very excited about the potential to partner with Ray Power to help this technology that already has one of the largest companies in the world as its pilot customer to scale across Africa and really see flourishing. There's a lot of things happening. It's not just our investing or our friends, because for the first time in 114 years since the Belgians invaded, there is a chance at true peace and the government really taking actions that haven't found traction in the past. So we're super excited about what's happening in the DRC. We're also late in diligence with a company in the Middle East on cross-border labor. So what we were just talking about is mining in Africa. Now we're switching gears to the epicenter of cross-border labor trafficking is the Middle East. Probably read about the World Cup and how many people died in the construction of the Qatari stadiums. I was actually there in the run-up to the World Cup as part of the US, my job with the U.S. Navy, and saw what this was happening right in front of us. And the Qatari system and all the UAE countries have gotten a ton of flack and are actually starting to really try to integrate how do they do cross-border labor hiring in an ethical way, because ultimately it's not, again, that we should turn off cross-border labor hiring. That's, again, not going to help all the people that are sourcing out of Bangladesh or Pakistan or Indonesia. What you need is ethical cross-border labor hiring at scale. And we've just issued a term sheet to this company that already has closing on $1 million in revenue from mostly Middle Eastern companies doing ethical recruiting in a cross-border context. And then they stay with them after hiring to make sure that nobody takes their passport, make sure that they have a good standard of living, that the way that they were promised that they were going to live and the job that they were promised actually happens, brings a degree of accountability that is very, very exciting. And we're also in diligence on another company that in Europe has about 50,000 users on it, that again is bringing transparency to those cross-border labor. They're really more focused on the agricultural industry in Europe, because again, we don't want to turn off cross-border labor opportunities. We just want to bring transparency so that people can get the jobs that they're promised, that there's accountability for when somebody's hired and promised one wage and one type of work, that they get that wage and they get that type of work and that they have safe conditions. So very exciting that every one of these, like, they tend to work in the small end of cross-border labor contracts is hundreds of people. The larger ends are in the tens of thousands of people. And the ability to bring redemptive entrepreneurs that have seen this problem and for years been working on how to build that transparency into it has the potential to meaningfully lift the life experience of people to the tune of thousands, and really shift the culture around slavery in these different industries, whether it's construction in the Middle East, agriculture in the EU. We really would love to make a dent in the U.S. is not innocent in our cross-border labor practices as well, and looking for scalable solutions there. But the pipeline is robust with opportunities that we expect to be able to. You can probably see in Fund 1, we only had a few labor trafficking opportunities that passed all the way through diligence with that high combination of both profit and impact potential. But we're seeing an explosion in these labor trafficking opportunities, and we're hoping it'll be a much bigger part of the fund too. And we're not alone. Forbes came out saying a huge chunk of this year's venture capital is going into supply chain, and they just were showing some graphs and different elements about how important it is for companies to be able to spend into these innovations in supply chain management, because the talent sourcing is such a big part of being able to scale these companies. So we're very excited about the potential for labor trafficking solutions, because every one of these have a chance, like their goal is to touch hundreds of thousands of lives and to meaningfully shift them from exploitative conditions to actually human flourishing. And those scalable pathways to human flourishing are just the heart of what we're hoping to see. That is, just to recap, one of the three major buckets of what Eagle Freedom Fund will do. This is just a deep dive into that one bucket. Freedom Fund 2 will also have the decimating the sex trafficking industry and the safe digital world mandates in it as well. And we're really excited. The pipeline just keeps growing. We really are at the launch sequence for an emerging industry, and that's great investing. So our target with this fund is to raise 50 million. We have it capped at 100 to go into 20 to 30 companies, and we're looking at hundreds per month to be able to get down to these really high impact companies that are almost always tech companies, have a complete thesis on some form of one of those three mandates: decimating labor trafficking, decimating sex trafficking, or building a safe digital world for kids, is what we're doing here with Eagle Freedom Fund. But would love to hear questions from you all about if that makes sense. I think the labor trafficking elements are some of the hardest to understand, because you're not, there's a simplicity to sex trafficking, because we can kind of picture just somebody buying somebody at a local hotel. But the exploitation that's happening in mining is quite different from what's happening in chocolate, is quite different from what's happening in Southeast Asia. Fishing is quite different from the cross-border labor exploitation. But we're seeing really exciting startups popping kind of all over the globe in every one of those sectors. But do those stories help you to catch a picture of what we mean when we see why we're excited that this could really make a difference? Kristen?
Oh, sorry. I just meant to give a thumbs up. It's awesome data. It's so great to see. Yeah, I'm just not used to seeing so much data on this. So it's, thank you for how you presented it.
We're excited about the data side of it. We've been starting to talk with universities about kind of creating, we're part of leading a group called the Clapham Accelerator that's, I guess it's closing on 100 different organizations, probably still shy of 100. They get together and try to build a dense network around how do we solve these issues. And one of those is just the dream that we could rank the S&P 500 on its exposure to slavery and its response to slavery. And that's kind of created a framework where we're looking at each of the sectors of the S&P 500 and finding the lead partner for each sector, whether like the National Center for Sexual Exploitation in COSI is clearly been the lead for like 15 years on how does tech relate to children. So partnering with them on big tech, and partnering with 58 out of the UK that I mentioned to Peter earlier is definitely created the best studies we know in the agricultural sector, just globally, where are the atrocities, where are the solutions, and then groups like with like Power Resources International. I've never met anybody else who's spent the last 15 years riding their mopeds around the DRC trying to solve labor trafficking and using blockchain and low Earth orbit satellites. You're just like, wow, but just kind of globally finding these people that it's, I told a friend the other day, it feels like treasure hunting, because you can't just come up with your plan for how you're going to meet all these people who've been working on the same issue for a decade plus. But I feel like we very much come at this from a faith background. Like the Lord's had these little treasures kind of dropped all over the globe, and we get to go treasure hunting as we find like, wait, you've been working on this issue for 15 years and you happen to be at the perfect moment where you could scale. Okay, that's amazing. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm sure you guys are somehow connected to Salt Exchange. That's they have a lot of data as well, but in a different pockets of this, more specifically human trafficking, sex trafficking, and then on the profit side.
Yeah, we just co-hosted an event with them, and we're looking at how to mesh their maps with a lot of what we do at Clapham is trying to get everybody to work together. So we're like, Glue, you've got maps. Salt, you've got maps. Darkwatch, you've got maps. Scarlet Hope, you've got maps. And Epic Project, like, it's literally like, how do we get you all to use the same interface so that we can just drive people into the same mechanisms? Because we're not going to go as fast if we all run in our silos. So, Zach, do I pass on my comments on Africa? I know you're much smarter on Africa than me.
No, it was great, and I actually wanted to ask you about that. So, in the DRC stuff in particular, what's like the the large scale, high level working theory of change in terms of like how you go from A to Z in terms of restaffing the mines ethically and with, of age willful workers. Because, it's one thing to say, I want to get the children out of the mines and stuff like that. But like, there's a lot that has to happen between A, B, C, D. And there's, potential for a lot of violence and things like that. And so I'm just
Yeah.
curious, like what you guys have come across as the best ways, to go about doing that.
I mean, the overarching theory of change is try to run the USDA organic playbook. We're used to paying 20 cents more for a banana because it's organic, and to do more ethically sourced metals. Am I freezing up? I saw some freezing. Yeah.
No, that's okay. So you're saying working more on the demand side and let that fix the supply, then going on the supply side and trying to fix all of the metals at the outset.
Other side of that, the conversation about treasure hunting that I had was about the supply side, where we just discovered a UK-based group that had very little overlap with all the work we've done in the DRC, and they're all just super passionate about this issue, child slavery in that part of Africa. So, and I can make sure you probably know them already, but if you're not, I can try to connect in. So there's
That'd be
definitely
awesome.
kind of, it feels like there's a move afoot on the supply side, but the real mining is very capital intensive. So when you get into serious conversations with mining investors, they kind of turn to you and say, "We'll solve the supply side, and then you can move hundreds of millions into projects." So we've been more focused on driving verified demand, which Apple is a breathtaking breakthrough. If we could get the goal would be if we can get that and then move into the Responsible Minerals Alliance is a subset of Responsible Business Initiative, has about 300 blue chips in it. So the dream would be go stand on the stage at Responsible Minerals Alliance and kind of say, this is the solution. Apple was one of the co-founders there. Apple's piloting it. It's scalable, and kind of go big on the demand side. I know we're in the Pollyanna phase of wouldn't that be cool, and we'll get smashed in the face with reality and stuff. But I don't have to speak that over us. But it certainly looks possible.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it was. I appreciate the comment around like let's not just overreact in pulling out of DRC, right? Like, and just kind of the picture of like, hey, the 8-year-old DRC boy, like, what does it look like to come alongside for a long-term solution and support? Just a lot of data, just really, really encouraging. I just feel like I need to like take the next 4 hours to digest like what you guys had just shared. And I guess my question, or just love to hear your perspective on, I don't even know how to phrase it well, but like, what do you sense is the unique stirring of the Holy Spirit that is resulting in this momentum this season right now? Like, well, it seems to me that that's a bit of a groundswell of interest and rallying behind this. Yeah, like, what's your sense? I'm just curious where your thoughts are.
It definitely feels like it doesn't take a doesn't take a genius to figure out that it wasn't us that started this. You start to just watch that sense that you're trying to keep up with something that the Lord is doing is very, very palpable. The way that similar groups of people have been getting together on this issue and are mating up, it would take a lot to try to ignore that that the Lord's been working on that and just answering the cries of. I mean, it's very, very clear that He listens to the cry of the poor and oppressed, and His ear is inclined towards them. So I can only imagine that He's just been brewing solutions for such a time as this. But somebody else could pull the threads together. We're just trying to go treasure hunting and keep up with what He's doing.
Yeah, kudos on whether it's on the Lipton side or on the Apple side. I think one thing I note is just like as I've been journeying along on the fringe for quite a bit now, like I said through Rachel, I think I observe a genuine posture of humility and just partnering, collaborating with others that I just admire and appreciate. And I'm just so encouraged. So thank you.
Thank you. We're encouraged too. There's a lot of cool things to praise the Lord about. Peter, did you come off of?
Yeah. Hi, Zach. Nice to see you again. Yeah, I've got two questions. The one is probably because of my world. How does sort of legal, regulatory standards, compliance come into this? And disappointingly, those things usually aren't like practical solutions. They just kind of create more paperwork. But are you seeing any way that kind of global solutions in that space are going to be helpful in this particular fight? And then also my second question is like, how can we help like this group of people? Is it to help send capital your way? Is it to help with deal flow, like finding potential target investments, or is it about helping with clients for the startups in your portfolio? What are you hoping that we can do to help?
It's a great question. On the first one, the regulatory is we absolutely see it as a tailwind. It is the challenge is that when people are facing regulations, they tend to want to do the minimum in order to get over the bar, if that makes sense. So and solutions like Evidensity are not designed to just get over the bar. They're designed to like deeply find out how bad the problem is and start hunting for real solutions, which you don't necessarily. And we've honestly been through years of trying to figure out how do you cross that divide, because the regulatory tailwind has actually been in effect for several years now, especially in the UK from really starting in 2015. Part of it is just actually storytelling and like how you frame it. Like in a lot of contexts, if you can change it to the chance to build brand value, then you can really change the pocket that they're pulling from. So like in hospitality, when it was a compliance conversation, very tiny budgets would be considered. But if you can change it to a conversation about a brand becoming perceived as safe, like just think about your likelihood to go stay at a hotel if you perceive it to be safe versus if you perceive it to not. It's literally the difference about whether you would even consider staying there. So if you can cross that divide and start getting hotels to think about this as a pathway to being perceived as safe, that is it literally is probably 100 times more valuable to them. From get off my back from a compliance perspective to create massive value. That is happening in hospitality, which is part of why their pipelines are exploding. We're hunting. I don't think we're there yet in labor trafficking because nobody's really crossed that divide. We are getting like Patagonia and some of the brands that have built around that are buying from Evidensity and trying to lead there. But that's where I think we see massive explosion in these types of solutions. And that's where we're getting into some of the public markets advocacy work to try to drive really accountability. There's exceptionally low accountability in the public markets right now around companies building solutions for human trafficking. Even in some of the most publicized stuff around, like Roblox lost 3 weeks ago, they lost $12 billion of market cap in a day because the Mississippi Attorney General came out and said, this platform is unsafe for children. You're like, yes, the markets are doing their job. And they got a new high on their stock like 12 days later. Like the market did not, it was a splash and it was gone. And I haven't done the correlations with the total market, so you might be able to explain that away. But when I look at the graph, I'm like, yeah, it was gone in less than 2 weeks. It just hadn't moved the market the way we would hope it would in a sustainable way. So really wanting the public markets to kind of start to rank in that way is part of what we're hoping for. Does that touch question one in the, we have great traction there and still have to cross the Rubicon on the 100 times more valuable conversation in other sectors.
Yeah, I mean, my experience doing global compliance with corporations is that we're nowhere near the shifting people from ticking a box mindset to actually achieving the intended outcome. And the problem is that the law is different all over the world, and you've got to move people from, just complying with the minimum standards in a particular country to actually trying to do something globally that's right.
Yeah.
We haven't solved that yet. And I mean, as a world, we haven't solved that yet. So if you could somehow get a portfolio of companies together that can get that right, then you move the needle completely.
We're definitely trying. That's why we're trying to rank the S&P, those 26 million labor trafficking victims, to all the publicly traded companies, and starting to rank out, like, literally grade levels is what we're hoping to do for every sector, like A, B, C, D, F, who gets into what grade letters and whatnot. That's like it's a project similar order of scope to like the Human Flourishing Project out of Harvard right now. Like, you're talking about ranking the entire world economy on how they deal with human rights. Yeah, no, it's really good. But that's why I'm such a big fan of you guys, because I think you're taking the right approach to maybe getting. I feel like we're still warming up. We're not even in inning one on that project, but but I love dreaming, and the Lord is moving. In terms of actions, we're absolutely looking for investors. That's one of our key limiting factors. The pipeline is our capital raising is growing. I think we've gone from like $500,000 a month to a couple million a month, like almost 4x the rate that we were at maybe a year ago. Vip could probably give me better numbers, but the pipeline of opportunities to really effectively deploy in this space still feels out of reach, if that makes sense. So definitely would love to catch up with that and raise a $50 to $100 million fund. I can share the link. We're actually working on gathering letters of thanks to Apple. So whether it's as a concerned citizen or a shareholder of Apple would love you all's signature on that. Or if you have a wealth manager that you think might be interested in that. I love letters of thanks because I think we haven't really used the carrots and the words thank you in the public markets enough, because there is actually inherent pressure that comes from the guys next to them that didn't get thank you. But it's kind of politically very low risk to tell Apple thank you for being the first mover on this deeply ethical supply chain. I'm not endorsing everything Apple does. I'm not asking anybody else to. We're just saying first mover risk is scary, and you took it on behalf of vulnerable people. Thank you. And so would love to literally get trillions in assets signing that. And then for those who are kind of more deeply involved in the movement, we had the accelerator that people can, but that's more for folks who kind of live and breathe fighting human trafficking, if that makes sense.
Hey, Wes, in terms of investing in companies who are creating technology to counter trafficking and things like that, like you guys are, how big is the investable private market right now? Like, if you had $10 billion, can you find a home for that right now? Or are more of these entrepreneurs popping up? Like, how much capacity is there to absorb capital from what you see right now? And obviously I know you're treasure hunting, so you don't see the whole map. But
in the way that we do it today, it's about 100 billion a year is where the capacity is. Cool. You would get much larger if you started getting into, if you had billions, you would go on the supply side of mining. You would start acquiring cross-border labor companies and redeeming them. You would go for just much more bold plays into the bigger industries that, like, you would just go into. The thing that's actually like infuriating to me is that everybody knows there are 26 million labor trafficking victims. Yeah. And there's kind of this sense of like, oh, it's impossible to solve. I'm like, no, it's not. We actually know where they are. Like, you literally we can get on a plane, we can go find them. It's not unknowable, which is why there's so much fire in me to like just put I think there's a huge project in front of us that, I mean, we started dreaming about what if we got a whole slew of universities working on the mapping the labor trafficking to the public markets projects. Literally, we could dump hundreds of millions into those. Just tiny slices of it will cost $250,000 here, $250,000 there. Like, I could map out $100 million worth of spend on that mapping project in a heartbeat. So I don't know if that gives you a sense of $100 million the way we do it today. Pandora's box if you get into buying East African mines and things like that, you know.
And one more follow-up question. Have you had any discussions with some of the large like DFIs, especially when you're talking about Africa and stuff like that? What is their level of willingness, if you've talked to them, to invest in this type of stuff? Or if not, that's fine.
We just in DC, we were just having some folks ask about those questions because we touched some of the mandates, but have never had the conversation with those. If you know people who could help us vet if that is worth the time, we're totally open to it. So
I'll ping you offline.
Well, really appreciate y'all diving in and just letting us share about